Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Intranet Refresh 2020, 5 Elements for Creating the Right Experience. For those of you who are new to our webinars, I just want to go through a couple housekeeping items. A recording of the webinar will be sent out within 24 hours, but it could take up to 48 hours, but we will get that out to you this week. Q&A will follow the presentation. However, if you do have a question at any time, feel free to ask it in our questions drop-down panel on the side of your screen. Following that, you can please follow us on LinkedIn at Akumina for upcoming webinars, white papers, and tidbits on our industry. With that, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. On the left is my colleague, Harrison Fetter. He is one of our account executives here at Akumina. And then the handsome gentleman to the right of him is myself, Michael Scott, Vice President of Marketing here at Akumina. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of the presentation, I did want to give a quick overview of who we are for some of you who aren't familiar with Akumina. We're an employee experience platform that empowers global enterprises to create these modern intranet spaces or employee hubs for their staff, so they can ultimately create an environment where their employees can work smarter and not harder. We are partnered up with some familiar faces such as Microsoft, Accenture, Avanade, and Gartner. You can also find us partnered up with a few other analysts such as Forrester and Nucleus. So before I hand over to Harrison, I did want to quickly talk about where intranets have been. And ultimately, they really haven't kept pace. And there's sort of four key areas that sort of stood out to us when we were building, this presentation and talking to different customers and prospective clients is, when they talk to us, some of the issues that they present is, these generic experiences that aren't really catered to, let alone the organization, but the individual roles within the organization, whether it's someone in administrative services and HR, in sales, it tends to be very generic and plain, not really relevant to the folks who are using it. Moreover, with that, and as a result of that, there's a disconnect with the other technologies. Their systems just aren't talking to one another, whether through data feeds or integrations. They're very disconnected and disparate, which unfortunately creates that inconsistent user experience because they have to jump from system to system. With that, another consequence often happens is there's collaboration hurdles where they're not exactly sure what comes next or what they need to be looking for from their colleagues. And ultimately, that can stunt productivity and the growth of an organization. And then finally, when you folks are investing into an intranet, whether it's your current one or if you're thinking about systems like Akumina or some of our competitors, ultimately one of the things that you need to consider is do you have a disengaged user base and why? And oftentimes that's one of the main reasons for an intranet refresh is there's just not adoption for a number of reasons, and probably many of those reasons are those three aforementioned ones I just went through. I'm hoping this isn't anyone on the call today, although it would lead us to a very productive conversation afterwards of where you can go in the future. But ultimately, a lot of intranets used to look like this. It was one size fits all. It was static. Not to go through this list, but it wasn't personalized. It was rigid. The functionality was limited, and it was templated. It wasn't based off of your branding or your needs. It was a very specific HTML web page that your organization can use. The only issue with that is, forget about all the aesthetic parts of it, is oftentimes it ended up being a content graveyard where folks would, if they did keep up with posting content, it was hard to find or not findable at all, quite frankly. And that's why, one of the main reasons we're talking today is what can you do if you're in this spot or in a more modernized looking version of the spot, but ultimately in that same place where it's not personalized and your content isn't being consumed, folks aren't collaborating through your intranet. What we're trying to accomplish today is show you, some of the things you can do, whether it's with your current system or with if you're looking to create a new one with another vendor, such as us or one of our competitors, some of the things you should consider when doing a refresh evaluation or starting from scratch evaluation. And one of those things where, I wanted to bring up where most of you guys are is you probably, if you're on this call, you probably have that sort of MVP one, meaning the first version of your intranet. And ultimately, you probably had this grand vision, being ambitious folks, and while you're on this webinar today, of having it more than just an intranet, but ultimately be a hub for your employees to, communicate, collaborate, share valuable information, and sort of pull valuable information from, and most likely much more. But I'm going to guess if you're on this call today, you haven't gotten to that point. Oftentimes, these intranets in a box, they are what they are. They can help you get to point A, but as your organization grows, as your team grows, as your networking grows, your client base, ultimately those needs of why you bought that original intranet box evolve, but unfortunately your solution's not evolving. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is what you can do to evolve it, whether it's through a refresh or a complete overhaul to get to that North Star, which is a true employee hub, a true employee experience platform. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Harrison. Harrison, take it away.
Thanks, Mike. So to start this off, I just wanted to give a quick overview of the next 5 points that I'll be talking about that are what we like to call core competencies with Akumina as we look at working with customers who are trying to find that North Star and get to the next step of their vision. So I think one of the biggest things with Akumina is the ability to integrate with the key technology that powers your business. So this could be components of the Office 365 stack like Teams, Yammer, Skype. You might be using Stream, different workflows like that, but it could also be these third parties that are, your ERP, your HCM, whether you're using Workday or Oracle or SAP, all the business critical systems. And what we do is bring that together to point number 2 in a centralized UI where employees can go to find all the technology that they need to do their jobs. There's this idea of pushing and presenting the content to the employees and serving it to the employees instead of the other way around where the employees have to hunt for this content and look for what they need to get their jobs done. Moving on to the third point, personalization is huge when we're working with our customers. Within each business, you have sets of user groups that are performing different jobs. And each of those subset of users has a unique group of needs. So how are you personalizing that content in your intranet and your platforms to make sure that each of those groups isn't getting content that is irrelevant, but only relevant content for them? And lastly, making mobile responsive, and kind of ties in with number 5 being available on any canvas, but having an application that is available on iOS or Android, and also allowing your platform to be available on canvases like SharePoint. And maybe you're using different devices. So you're using a PC station, a mobile phone, maybe you're using a tablet in the field. So bringing this entire technology set together into this employee experience platform that brings the journey together. So to start on that first point, the integrations with our key technologies, I had mentioned we are a Microsoft partner and integrate with the entire Office 365 stack. So what you should think about here is, and as you can see by the example on the screen showing MetLife, they were able to pull in 37 different systems through an open API framework that allows our service tier to make calls to the data tier, which is Office 365 or your third parties, and then present that in MetLife's framework. So they were able to bring in calendar appointments. They were able to bring in tasks out of several different systems and tie it all together so that when a MetLife employee signs into this experience, they're seeing all these different pieces of information organized and stack ranked based on their role. So if I was signed in as a director level in information technology, my experience and the systems that are being displayed are going to be completely different than any other employee in HR or maybe an executive in the C-suite or in business strategy. Now, again, this is flexible and scalable. So what we see a lot in our customer group is not this, all right, we're going to, achieve our North Star vision right away. It's more of a phased approach. So they may have their initial intranet project that gets them to a baseline. Maybe they're transitioning from Office, 365 on-prem to the cloud, and they're looking to get something up and running quick. Once that's done, you're able to assess and get feedback from employees that says, hey, what integrations do we need? What are we trying to accomplish with this? How is the design looking? How is this benefiting employees? And then take that to the next phase. So it's this idea that we're not hemming you in to this single deployment and this single framework that you're going to be stuck to, but it's something that is flexible and scalable over time as your organization evolves over time. So moving on to centralized UI within an organization and their intranet. We've found with a lot of our customers, and this particular example is with Big Lots, that they're looking for this idea of a one-stop shop user experience for employees. And I had touched on this a bit in the prior slide, but it's the idea of tying together all of the systems into one place, not through a bunch of click fields, or link outs, but through actually serving up a branded hub, an activity stream that pulls data from all the different systems that an employee uses and curates their news to them in this single pane of glass. So as you can see on the Big Lots experience, they're able to spotlight certain news based on tags. They're able to show new hires and promotions to highlight what employees are doing in the field. They have a mobile app that gives a similar overview, and then they have ways for employees to check their calendar and look in their people directory and find colleagues that they might need to speak with. And this is all tied together in this centralized user interface that's branded. It's not an Akumena intranet, it's a Big Lots intranet. It's allowing them to put their corporate brand and feeling into this centralized experience. Now moving on to the third bullet, touching on personalized experiences for your workforce. Every single business and organization that we work with is unique. And while there are often a lot of similarities between the problems that our customers are trying to address with Office 365 and SharePoint and employee experience, we often run into trends as to what folks are looking for in their new intranet site. So this example that you're seeing here is with our customer Banner Health. They are a 50,000 employee healthcare organization based in Arizona, and we're looking for a way to personalize the dashboards for each one of their unique employee groups. So for them, they might have administrators in the corporate offices. They might have different groups of staff within the hospital on different floors. If you have a med-surg floor, within that floor, you might have groups of nurses, doctors, and so being able to target that content to those groups and provide this place where these employees could land on a day-to-day basis to check on their to-dos and to check on approvals and different tasks and just see what's going on in the organization was really important for them. And what we've encountered with Banner and with a lot of our other customers is this idea of a deskless worker, or the remote employee. And the deskless worker may still come in for shifts, but they won't be behind a desk. They are mobile. They are the nurses that are constantly on the go, charting. meeting with patients, checking in with doctors. They are the, floor workers at a Big Lots, the associates that are stocking shelves or serving customers. They're the people that aren't your traditional corporate employee that have been missed and neglected by technology for the last 20 years and now are being brought into the experience of the overall organization through the technology. So a lot of the people that we talk to, by personalizing this experience for their workforce, are also looking to engage with these remote and deskless workers that are and have been neglected in the past by technology and have not been touched by technology. So as I had mentioned before, these remote and deskless employees are a really important part of every workforce and making a business run. They're often the frontline workers that are engaging with your customers and, with the people that are, investing in the business. So to have a native mobile responsive app that is customizable and manageable from the front end is something that's incredibly important to these employees that are on the go. We have a customer that has a large sales force that is often in the field, and it was critical for them to be able to provide those employees with a native mobile application that allows their users in their sales team, when they're on a flight, to maybe book a ride through an Uber integration or check their flight schedule, or see what opportunities they need to be looking into and see who they should be networking with internally on those opportunities, and do this all from their mobile device. This was incredibly important. So this is something that we have taken and brought forward with several other customers with the idea of not creating a one-size-fits-all app, but something that is branded and customized and personalized to the employee and your organization, creating something that's native mobile and responsive to the brand, to the device that it's being used on, and that will essentially make employees' lives a lot easier. Instead of having to log into a site on their computer and go through all the sign-ons, they're able to use the GPS camera biometric scanning in order to get on the go and do their jobs. And finally, centralized management in the app allows the content authors and page admins to go in and edit the experience on the fly. So maybe you need to edit an article on the go, or you need to edit a page when someone's published it. You can do that from within the app. And lastly, covering our frameworks and how they're set up. So the ability to access on any canvas, again, is one of our core competencies. And the way that we do this is through our front-end and back-end frameworks. So when we talk about canvases, we are a Microsoft partner and ISV, so the primary canvas we use to display is SharePoint. While we're not completely limited to this, we also leverage GoNative.io, ISO, and Android in order to provide employees with native mobile apps. The way our platform works is that the app manager, which sits in your Azure or our customer's Azure tenant, it lives in there and makes calls to all the different systems through the Graph API, and then feeds that into your SharePoint instance that's been customized with your branding, your look and feel. So when we talk about canvases, many people who are using SharePoint are trying to figure out, okay, we have this user interface. Yes, it's a little clunky, but SharePoint has some incredible content authoring and content management powers. How do we leverage these with the rest of the Office 365 stack, yet reach all these other canvases like iOS and Android, as well as multiple devices? We have customers who have a lot of employees in the field, like I had mentioned, but maybe they're not on a mobile device. Maybe they're on a tablet that's signed into Wi-Fi at a specific location. So being able to leverage these front-end frameworks through a back-end management framework and tailor that experience and make it customized to any canvas based on what the needs of your employees are is incredibly important, and it's something that we've done with a lot of customers. So just to wrap and go back through some of the things that our customers are focused on and what we as an organization are focused on is that everything is employee-centric. So as I had mentioned before, there's this concept of push and pull with Acumatica and almost serving up the content to employees instead of having them have to go out and find it. So we're taking this idea of serving employees what they need instead of making them search for it as a way to serve and push the content to employees, and then allow them to be able to, on the flip side, if they need to make an edit to something, push that data back into the systems of record without having to go into the systems of record. So just to wrap, again, we are mobile first. We believe that to be employee centric nowadays, it is important to have an employee app, because with the millennial generation and Gen Z, they grew up in an age of technology where they and every brand that they know has a consumer-facing mobile app, and when they go into the workplace, they're expecting this similar treatment. They want it to be personalized based on their role, so depending on the work that they're doing on a day-to-day basis, they want to have the information that they need to do their jobs better, faster, and easier. We want to be able to transform the way they're working through that personalized experience and through that mobile-first experience, so that they're being part of the brand, engaging with the company, not feeling like they're being neglected because they have to remember 10 different passwords and sign into all these different sites. And creating that connection by surfacing data from all the different systems so that it's in one place instead of 20 is incredibly important. And lastly, allowing our customers to innovate and employees to be innovative based on real-time insights that they're getting on their usage of the platform and based on where they're seeing the most value in the content that's being provided to them.
Awesome. Thank you, Harrison, and thank you everyone for attending. We're going to move over to the Q&A. As we compile some of the questions, I'm going to launch a quick poll. We're just curious, as we go through this Q&A, who's actually interested in starting that refresh program. And for those of you who are, we're happy to send out some additional thought leadership resources as you begin this process or are continuing this process. So just give us 30 seconds and we will begin Q&A. All right, thank you, folks. Let's get started with the Q&A, and we should be able to wrap up maybe a minute or two early for those of you trying to go grab lunch at this time. So the first question that we got was, and Harry, you can answer this one. We actually are in the healthcare industry, but for any other attendee who's in a regulated industry, is there any way to govern? What type of governance do you have so folks can only see what they should be seeing?
Right. So governance is a big thing, a big issue that we hear a lot about, because the SharePoint governance can often be complex. So what I will say, the way Acumatica addresses this is that we default to SharePoint governance. So based on how you were set up and how your governance structure is set up, is that we always fold to that overarching governance. Now, there is a model inside Acumatica where you can essentially permission content based on user buckets. So the way we do authentication is through Azure Active Directory. And so the way you want to think about personalizing content and governing content is that you can assign users based on their geographic location, based on their group in Azure, or based on what we call our personas, which can be any user bucket that you lump a group or define a group of users in to have certain permissions in the site. So a lot of people say, well, now that we're creating this site with a great UI, like, isn't it just going to be filled with content and full of junk? And the answer is, well, no. If you set up the governance structure and the content authoring structure correctly, you shouldn't have everybody be able to publish new pages and new articles in the site whenever they want. You should have an overall admin, perhaps, who then receives or people who will submit content to that admin, who will then, propose edits, and it'll go back and forth that way. So we do provide ways to organize the content and structure the content so that not everybody is allowed to see it and not everybody is allowed to produce it based on these user groups. But again, we default to the SharePoint and Azure AD governance model that was set up when you moved to Office 365.
Thank you, Harrison. And we do have another question. It makes sense since we got a lot of IT folks on the line. They want to know, how does Kumina actually store and secure the data?
Right. So we are actually not storing or securing any of your data. And we get asked this question a lot with earlier stage customers. They're like, well, what happens if we decide to, leave Kumina, or we don't want to use your platform anymore? It's like, well, you've installed our app manager, which is a .mvc provider hosted app that lives in your Azure tenant. So unless you want us to host your Kumina instance for you, all the data will live in your Azure tenant, in your Office 365 tenant. We will not be storing any of your data. And this is one of our largest core competencies. It's why we are GDPR compliant. It's why we are HIPAA compliant. It's why we are used in law firms, finance, and healthcare, is that we are not storing any of our customers' data. So Kumina gets installed in your Azure tenant and is displayed in your SharePoint unless you say otherwise. So I hope that answers that question. I'm also happy to discuss in more depth at another time as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Harrison. And thank you, everyone who joined us today. As a reminder, the recording will be sent out within 24 to 48 hours. For those of you who, and I would assume a lot of you who are thinking of an intranet refresh or starting a new project in the upcoming future or upcoming year, we do have in the handout section of the GoVerbNow webinar panel a Modern Intranet Buyer's Guide that that was helped compiled with some of our friends over at Clearbox and Spark Trajectory to digital workplace and modern Intranet consultant firms. So feel free to download that. It's a great starting point for anyone trying to figure out where they fit in terms of a modern Intranet platform versus a fully customized employee experience platform. With that, this webinar is concluded, and thank you all for joining us today. Have a great rest of your week.